Hey, it's me, the Quenchies. I'm that late afternoon craving you just can't shake. Wait, what's that? Welch's Grape Aid? No! Made with real fruit and no added sugar, nothing answers the call of the Quenchies like Grape Aid. Got the Quenchies? Grab a Grape Aid in your juice aisle.
Hey, What Next listeners, it's Mary Harris. Before we get to today's episode, I have a favor to ask. This relationship feels slightly one-sided. Just me talking to you all the time. We want to change that. We have a listener survey we want you to fill out. It's going to really help us do the show better. And we'll hear from you. What you want, what you need, what you love, what you hate. All of that stuff. You can find the survey in our show notes for all the latest episodes, or you can visit slate.com/whatnextsurvey. Okay, on to the show. In these closing days of the 2024 election, the New York Times' Matt Flegenheimer has been spending a lot of time with a perennial loser. I do not say that to be mean, but Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate for president, has lost a lot. She's lost 2 bids to be Massachusetts governor. She is on her 3rd presidential run. Matt's been following Stein around anyway because, frankly, Stein does not need to win to shake up this race. And with her far-left positioning on everything from the economy to the war in Gaza, Democrats have come to see her as an agent of chaos.
For as long as she's been running for offices, and that's now more than 20 years, she has faced a sort of equivalent attack from Democrats that a vote for her is a vote for the Republican on the ballot as well.
Back in 2016, if just a few 100,000 of Stein's 1.5 million votes had gone to Hillary Clinton, Clinton might have won. Now, with polls showing Trump and Harris neck and neck, Dems do not want to relive this experience. So in swing states, they've put up billboards featuring Stein in a MAGA hat. They're running TV ads, too.
Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president. So why are Trump's close allies helping her?
I mean, in this ad, Jill Stein's face literally morphs into Donald Trump's. It's clever visually.
That's why a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump.
Jill Stein, I like her very much. You know why? She takes 100% from them.
Have Democrats ever done something like this before?
They say that they have not. This was, according to them, the first time they had ever directed any kind of ad blitz like this at a third-party candidate.
But having followed along as Jill Stein campaigns, Matt says her voters might not be so easy to woo back.
I met a handful out in Dearborn who did vote for Clinton in 2016, for Biden in 2020, and are not even considering Harris. These are Stein voters now.
Solid Stein voters.
Yeah, and as one of the voters said to me, you know, he's sort of spent his entire adult life voting for the lesser of 2 evils, and he's sick of it and cannot abide what the Democrats have become in his mind, and he's voting for Jill Stein this time.
Jill Stein can't possibly win this election, right?
You know, I've tried to make a habit of not making predictions about politics, but it seems very, 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 very unlikely that Jill Stein will become president of the United States, and I think a lot of her supporters recognize that.
By the end of your time with her, did you get a sense of why she's running anyway? Most candidates are running to win.
Yeah, I mean, she talks about this sort of 2-party kind of death loop that she sees the American political cycle as being stuck in. She has a line that she likes to say that, you know, forget the lesser evil, fight for the greater good. She made an interesting case that surprised me a little bit that, you know, especially the anti-war protest movement tends to thrive much more under Republicans than under Democrats. It sort of goes to sleep, in her words. So while she does not explicitly say that her goal is to defeat Harris, she does suggest that the broader cause might be served well by a Trump administration.
It is the final week before the election, and in 7 swing states, the candidates are tied. This week, we're going to look at the people and places that could tip the scales. Today on the show, Jill Stein. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are the things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it. So your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. This episode is brought to you by Home Chef. All of us dread the what should we have for dinner question, and so often it leads to ordering takeout from the same old places, which might be the easiest option, but it's never really all that satisfying, and it costs a whole bunch. So if you'd rather enjoy a home-cooked meal without the stress of planning ahead, Home Chef makes it pretty easy, and it could even save you some money. Home Chef sent me a few of their meal kits to try out. My whole family appreciated the recipes so much that we actually kept a few so we could replicate them ourselves. We also appreciated the fact that everything was all measured out for us already. We just had to mix up the meal and enjoy. Home Chef provides fresh ingredients and chef-designed recipes conveniently delivered to your doorstep to simplify your cooking experience. Whether you prefer classic meal kits with pre-portioned ingredients and easy instructions, or speedy recipes ready in less than 30 minutes, oven-ready kits with pre-chopped ingredients, or quick microwave meals, Home Chef has you and the entire family covered. Not only is it convenient, but it's economical too. Home Chef customers say that they save an average of $86 per month on groceries. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 18 free meals, plus free dessert for life. And of course, free shipping on your first box. Go to homechef.com/whatnext. That's homechef.com/whatnext for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. You heard that right. Homechef.com/whatnext. You have to be an active subscriber to get that free dessert.
Okay, I want to roll the clock back if we could. And I'm wondering, can you introduce Jill Stein to my audience? Because I think a lot of listeners may know her name, and they may just not know the details of who she is and how she even came to be in the position she's in right now, which is a presidential candidate for the Green Party. So where did she come from? She's a doctor, right?
She's a doctor. She grew up outside of Chicago, went to Harvard and Harvard Med, was a folk musician. Strangely enough, there was a lawyer who was a lawyer in the Trump White House named Ty Cobb, who was a schoolmate of hers who talked about remembering her at Harvard, sort of finding the perfect acoustics in a stairwell to strum away.
Yeah, I listened to some of her music. I said it was like if the Indigo Girls and the Spin Doctors had had a baby, it would have been Jill Stein's music.
Put that on the poster, yeah. So she, is this sort of, in her description, this kind of Vietnam era dissident, skeptical of both parties, but very much not on a political track herself.
Was she a Democrat?
She said she voted Democrat generally, was sort of skeptical of both parties, but when she voted, would vote Democrat, but wound up sort of involved in the 2000 Nader campaign, playing some music, actually, among other things, at some events, and really found herself kind of galvanized by the Green Party, by Nader. And then in 2002, she says she's approached to run for governor in Massachusetts.
It's quite a leap from Dr. Folk singer for the Nader campaign to running for governor. It seems almost unrealistic.
It is. And she had gotten energized, she said, by a couple of sort of advocacy issues, including a clean elections law in Massachusetts. I think some environmental advocacy as well. So she'd gotten a little more involved, obviously, in the 2000 campaign, but winds up running in 2002, and it's not the last office she'll run for.
So she's used to long shot bids. Has she ever held elected office?
She was on a town body in Lexington, Massachusetts, where she lives.
She lost bids for governorship twice. How did that, in her mind, amount to, or in the Green Party as a whole. How did that amount to, okay, let's run this person for president?
It's a fair question. I think in a lot of campaigns for third parties generally and for the Greens, finding a standard bearer can be difficult. So I do think there's a different quality to how nominees are selected than you would sort of visualize for a major party. There's not like an extensive, 50-state primary process that necessarily, gets big media attention and, you run ads and all that. It's a little bit more bespoke. But she had done relatively well in 2002 in Massachusetts. I think she got more than 3% of the vote, which doesn't sound like much, but was seen as like a relatively strong showing. She acquitted herself well on the debate stage with Romney, and she was willing to do it. So she ends up running for president for the first time in 2012.
One of her primary rivals was Roseanne Barr, just to give a sense of the field.
Yes, and to give a sense of how sort of atypical the political conversation can be around these sort of small party primary processes.
How seriously were the Democrats taking her back then? I mean, she'd be running against Obama, right, for his second term.
Yeah, she was not particularly seen as a factor. I think Democrats did still have on their mind that, in their estimation, Nader was somebody who helped cost them the White House in 2000. So there was this kind of what Jill Stein would call a spoiler mythology around the Green Party candidate dating to that. But she was not seen as a major factor in 2012.
It's so interesting that she calls it a spoiler mythology. Like, I just wonder, is that a mythology or is that just history, like facts?
Voting is tricky, right? Like even with polling and exit polling, there's not a ton of precision to, all of these Nader voters, all these Stein voters would end up here definitively, even though, we can get into this sort of famously in 2016, Jill Stein's vote totals exceed the margin of victory for Trump in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So a lot of Democrats, certainly a lot of Clinton campaign veterans would say, that cost us decisively. If Jill Stein's not there, if she's running a different kind of campaign, we win. It's hard to know for sure. Certainly, Democrats and Republicans think that in that campaign and in this campaign, Stein is helping the Republican cause. But any kind of definitive answer on that stuff is a little less solid.
Yeah, let's dig into 2016, because I feel like that's the race where she really becomes this bête noire for the Democrats. And I want to talk about how that happened. Obviously, this is Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders had been involved. So what happens in 2016 that brings Jill Stein so much attention from the Democrats, makes them rethink how they think about her?
She was certainly seen as a figure in the sort of broader opera of 2016 during the campaign. But after it's all over, you look at those states, you look at how close it was.
Yeah, to be clear, Jill Stein got 1.5 million votes, right?
Just shy of 1.5 million votes across all states.
She also asked for recounts, right?
She did. And the other sort of factor that comes into play and that obviously has gotten a lot of attention post-2016 is that in the course of these investigations into Russian interference in 2016, there was a finding that Russian actors were actively sort of promoting on social media the Stein campaign to try to siphon votes from Clinton, to sort of help Trump by proxy there. So there was this effort, both domestically and internationally, from some Republicans and Russians, obviously, to elevate her at the expense of Clinton.
Is it worth talking about Jill Stein's relationship with Russia? Because my understanding is that, even in 2015, she was going to Russia for a celebration of RT, the Russian TV network. It's not the kind of behavior you'd expect from someone running for president of the United States.
No, so she was, her campaign got a lot of airtime from RT. There's this sort of famous photo of her at a dinner table that includes Vladimir Putin, that includes Michael Flynn, who was Trump's national security advisor after he became president. Stein has downplayed all of this and said that she was essentially there to preach peace and push the kind of Green Party agenda that she would anywhere else. And we should say there was no finding that she was aware of this effort on social media from Russian actors to push her campaign forward. But that certainly generated more smoke, and Democrats have pointed to that as further evidence that she's here as some kind of spoiler and or international chaos agent.
If we fast forward to 2020, Jill Stein decided not to run. Why?
It's hard to know why she didn't run. And the candidate who ran instead, and Howie Hawkins, got far fewer votes about 400,000 or so. So, like a third of Stein's number, less than that. The third party vote in that election was much smaller generally than it was in 2016. In 2016, you had two nominees who were seen as broadly unpopular to a lot of the electorate. And between Stein, and we should mention the Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson, that year got more than 4 million votes. So that's, much more than Stein. And between them, looked at a number approaching like 5%, I think, total of the votes, which is, not nothing in an election that close. I think there was probably an expectation that Clinton would win in 2016. It felt safe, relatively safe, to kind of protest vote for a third party candidate, no matter who you wanted to win in 2016, because it seemed like the outcome was sort of a fait accompli. I don't think anybody thought that in 2020 or in 2024. I do think, in an election that seems as close as this one does, and in elections that we've had the last two cycles that have been very close in a lot of states, small voter pools can assume these like existential stakes. So if that's tens of thousands of Stein votes in Michigan, if it's trying to, appeal to disaffected voters in some other state that have nothing to do with Jill Stein, any one of these little factors can matter so much. It's just hard to know how prominent the Stein vote will be and whether it will shake out in such a way that it directly affects the outcome. And again, I should say, there are plenty of voters I spoke to who, if it were ranked choice voting and they had 1,000 slots to fill, they would not put Kamala Harris in any of them.
After the break, most Americans say they do want a viable third party, but do they really want this? This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
I want to fast forward to this race a little bit. Initially, Jill Stein said she would not be running in 2024. What happened to change her mind?
So Cornel West, the left-wing academic intellectual, was initially expected to go after the Green Party nomination for president. Essentially, last year in the fall, I believe, winds up diverting from that, running as an independent instead, and there was this vacancy atop the Green Party. And in Stein's telling, in our conversation, she sort of very reluctantly, after some kind of internal negotiation with other people within the party, agreed to take on the mantle and be the nominee again.
It's interesting. You say reluctantly. I don't get the sense from your reporting that she's a reluctant campaigner.
Certainly not now that she's a candidate. And, there have certainly been people in her life, family and friends going back decades, who did not want this campaign to happen, who had made clear to her in no uncertain terms that they hoped that she would not run, asked her not to run.
Your reporting is quite intense in this regard. Like, you say her own sons asked her not to, or she doesn't have their support. And you also quote from letters people have sent her. Some people you say are going through intermediaries, like people who just said, please don't do this.
Yes, one of her sons said that the family asked her not to run a year ago. Obviously, she's running, so here we are. And friends, including a friend of hers who voted for her in 2016, and I think broadly sort of shares her view on a lot of policy issues, sent a note to her recently saying essentially, for the good of your cause, for the good of the country, please instruct your supporters to get behind Harris, especially in the swing states.
What does she say to people like that in her life?
She did not respond to that email. I can say that much. I mean, she talks about this sort of higher cause that she's after, and that there is a level of propaganda, she sees it, around the two-party system, and that this is a cause bigger than herself.
It strikes me looking at this year that unlike her previous runs, she has an issue that gives her campaign a moral clarity. And I'm curious how that's going to translate to votes. She talks about Gaza a lot. It's a huge part of why she's running and what's motivating her, seemingly from the outside. Last time she was running, 2016, she got 1.5 million votes or around that. I'm curious what their internal data, or just even what her internal thinking, tells her about what the Green Party turnout's going to look like this time.
I mean, she, when I saw her speak in Michigan, she said, she doesn't accept as written in stone she will not be sworn in as president in January, which, we'll see. I think there's a lot of skepticism around that, but this is not a sort of fourth tier issue she's seizing on. It's obviously something that's top of mind for a lot of voters, even if they're not Stein supporters. So she has sort of been in that conversation in a way that 2016 policy-wise, she might not have been. The interesting thing also with that rally and generally among people who share her view on the Middle East is that Stein does not speak explicitly about her goal being to defeat Kamala Harris. Some of her supporters are very explicit about that. She's been endorsed by a group called Abandon Harris. Speakers who took the stage before her at this event in Dearborn were saying in no uncertain terms, the goal is to punish the vice president. We might not win the White House, but we can absolutely help deny her the state of Michigan and make clear that there is a sort of electoral penalty for, in their minds, helping to foment genocide. Stein, when I spoke to her afterwards, said that she had what she called a divergent point of view, but sort of hastened to add, she totally understands why, for people who care deeply about this, it's important to show that there's a price to pay politically for the White House's position in the Middle East. So she certainly feels that support, and there is a kind of visceral reaction that she's gotten on that issue that she might not have gotten on anything in 2016.
How genuine do you think Stein's commitment is to the people of Gaza and finding some kind of peaceful solution to what's happening in the Middle East?
I feel like it's not for me to answer what politicians' level of genuineness is on any issue. She certainly speaks about it passionately and has resonated with a lot of people in the community.
I mean, I asked this question because, earlier this year, Jill Stein asked a Palestinian human rights lawyer to be her running mate. And this lawyer ended up saying no. And in a thread on X, she explained that she had offered to join the ticket if Jill Stein would be willing to concede the election should Democrats deliver on a permanent ceasefire and an arms embargo. And Stein said no to that. To me, that's a telling anecdote.
I certainly won't speak for Stein. I think she has made the case that Democrats are not to be trusted on this issue.
Democrats have also accused Stein of getting help from Republicans and people tied to Trump. You can see it in their advertising where they tie Stein to Trump. How reasonable is this criticism? I'm a little bit curious what came first, the chicken or the egg. Because when I talk to election workers in Wisconsin, they all talk about all this election craziness really started with Jill Stein in 2016 asking for a recount. And I'm a little bit curious whether the recount lawyers are just the people who helped Jill Stein the first time and now they went to Trump and now they're working with Stein again, or whether it's true that Republicans are actively boosting her campaign.
That's certainly been true. I mean, there are figures from Republican politics who have helped on legal cases for ballot access, who have helped submit signatures. Jay Sekulow, who was a lawyer for Trump at his first impeachment trial, represented the Green Party in Nevada, trying to get her on the ballot. So it's just plainly true that people with ties to Trump and people with histories in Republican politics have worked to help Stein. Steve Bannon, among others, was very explicit earlier this year talking about the more exposure these guys get, the better it is for us. There is a clear electoral calculation there. And certainly Republicans, as Democrats do as well, think that Jill Stein's presence helps them.
Stein has been the head of the Green Party for more than a decade now. And in that time, Green Party membership has dropped a lot. I just wonder what you make of her as a leader of this party. Like, how successfully is she leading the Green Party?
Yeah, I mean, this is the point that you've heard AOC make especially forcefully in recent weeks, that, the word she used was predatory, describing Jill Stein, that there was a sense that she was coming in every 4 years and kind of exploiting voters' justifiable grievances about the political system and not growing her party, only showing up in the presidential years. Stein obviously rejects that. She says, we're always here. It's just the media coverage comes and goes. But, you could also look at some of the vote totals, which is not a perfect proxy for this, but Stein obviously did better in 2016 than the candidate did in 2020. There is not a major foothold that they've made in, other legislative bodies, for sure. That's just true.
Here's the thing. According to Gallup polling, most Americans do want a third party. Last year, the number of Americans who said they wanted a third party hit 63%, which is a record high. Is there some way that Jill Stein and the Green Party could be building power that looks different than this? Or is this, what she's doing, continually running, the only option?
It's hard to know. Certainly nobody else has created a third-party infrastructure that elevates that party to anywhere near where the two major parties are. So it's not unique to the Greens. But yeah, I think that disconnect and those sorts of numbers that she cites herself are part of why she sees this campaign as necessary. She thinks that the people are broadly with her on this idea of having other options, that there is this sense in between election cycles that you'd really like to have another option if you could, even if you don't, feel great about what that might entail. And then at the end, you get to it, it's, there's kind of only two people who might win, so let's just hold our nose and choose one of them. She sort of rejects that premise out of hand. But no, that is not translated into any kind of major escalation in Green Party power by any stretch.
What does success look like for Jill Stein?
She had an interesting... I asked her at some point what felt different about this campaign and what seemed sort of similar to her past campaigns. And she said, I'm going to maybe butcher this slightly, but in past runs, it felt like we were kind of ahead of the curve, and now it feels like the curve has caught up to us. It's resonating, it's breaking through. It's, she doesn't want to put a number on what that support looks like as, success versus failure, but being heard and counted. And that's sort of why this is fascinating, because if Democrats and Republicans are right about the effect that she has on the ballot, being heard and counted might well mean helping Donald Trump. That would certainly register as being heard and counted.
Matt, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Matt Flegenheimer is a correspondent over at the New York Times. And that's our show. Just a reminder that we are teaming up with Slate Politics to bring you The Surge each week. It's a fun little treat that drops into this feed every Friday right around lunchtime. It's me and Jim Newell talking through everything that's happening in the election. And I gotta say, if you are looking for someone to hold your hand throughout this whole thing, you really should be listening to The Surge. There's a catch, though. The catch is that to get The Surge, you have to join Slate Plus, our membership program. You can subscribe really easily right on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of the What Next page. Or you can go visit slate.com/whatnextplus and get access wherever you listen. You'll get bonus content like The Surge, plus no ads on any of our Slate content. Really. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
I said to Roger, the last thing you are, fair and balanced. That should have been my slogan.
When the Fox News Channel first went on the air, it promised to change television.
Few broadcasts take any chances these days, and most are very politically correct. Well, we're going to be different.
It's going to be kick-ass, and I want to be part of it.
I'm Josh Levine. In this season of Slow Burn, we'll look at the moment in the early 2000s when Fox News became a political and cultural force.
I'm okay with wearing an American flag. And if you're not, I think you need to examine who you are.
You'll hear from Fox insiders, many who've never spoken out before.
I was not told about that beforehand, for good reason. I wouldn't have gone along with it.
And you'll hear from the activists and comedians who tried to stop it.
He said, "You're being sued by Fox." I went, "Really? That's fabulous."
Slow Burn Season 10, The Rise of Fox News. Hear the entire season now, wherever you listen.
Hey, it's Mary again. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this episode. Before I say goodbye for the day, quick reminder to take our listener survey that we're running this month. We want to make sure your voice is heard. Visit the show notes or slate.com/whatnextsurvey. It'll only take a few minutes, I promise. Totally painless. Thanks again. I'll see you next episode.